Hi, it's Crystal. Welcome back. Today we will finish Isra's chapter. And as we learned yesterday, Isra's really having a hard time adapting to her life in prison, but she's a survivor and she's gonna conquer this. But before I start reading, I wanted to share that I've always been intrigued by the idea that the dead can watch over you, and I really wanted to integrate this into the novel, hence with the male narrators. So you'll see today how they're starting to integrate themselves within the plot of the novel. She can't see you, said Cockroach. I know, said Soldier quietly. What are you looking at? Cockroach wanted to know. Your hair. What about it? Said Cockroach. I'm sorry. It's just, I can't wait to tell my friend Raven about the cockroach with the purple hair. He's never going to believe me. Oh, he'll believe you, said Cockroach. You're probably right, said Soldier. Being trapped in prison brought new meaning to an article that I read in the newspaper about how mass overcrowding in all the penitentiaries across Thailand may be attributed to the country's war on drugs. That battle commenced in 2003 when our government enforced stricter penalties in the form of zero tolerance for all drug related offenders. Amphetamines, previously considered a legal stimulant, were recategorized as illegal, which meant that punishment for a processor or a seller was as severe as the punishments for heroin. All drug offenses resulted in prison, life imprisonment in prison, or capital punishment. I was sure when many of Thais first heard that, they thought, great, wonderful way to clean up the streets of all those drug dazed criminals. But they did not really understand what zero tolerance entailed. I do. And I cannot believe that the individuals enforcing this law did not have the foresight to see the problems it would cause. Or maybe they did, and they just didn't care. Now, common sense dictated that if you increase the number of people behind bars, the budget would need to be adjusted accordingly for this massive influx of offenders. It was not. Most people were in prison for drug related offenses, and the number of women incarcerated is on the rise. From what I could see, if the current trend continued, the number of female prisoners by 2013 would equal that of male prisoners. If I had my way, I was sure as hell I would not be in here to see that. So I wrote the king. Many of us wrote to him hoping to be pardoned for our crimes. I spent many an hour toiling away at a letter to convince the king he should pardon me. In all the years I worked, I have never dedicated as much effort as I did to that letter. Every word was thought out, analyzed, and rethought. When I finished, I had one passionately perfect plea. We had all heard that in a recent amnesty, some 150 women were released. Others had their sentences reduced. That gave me hope. In reality, few prisoners would be released, but that did not deter me because I intended to be one of those few. Given the cold-heartedness of my actions, murder would seem a crime that the king could not forgive. But I figured murder was more apt to be forgiven given the current climate with the government's harsh stance on drug offenders. I, therefore, had a more decent chance as my crime was elevated above the majority of offenders in prison. Thank you, war on drugs. I made great strides to leave Cockroach behind. 8 years had passed since I was first incarcerated, and I finally graduated from the lifeless body counting in the courtyard to esteemed participant in the prison reform program. When I began the program, I got my life back, or as much of it as I could, given the circumstances. The program was offered to those whose sentences were nearing the end, so that they could be equipped with a skill set when they re-entered society, or to those long-term prisoners like myself who were well behaved. The program was run by the Chiang Labor Skills Development and the Ministry of Public Health. Their offerings were varied. We could train in traditional massage, learn to become beauticians, tailors, mechanics, tile layers, bakers, weavers, or flower arrangers. I opted for reflexology training because I thought it was fascinating how the feet were the gateway to the organs of the body. Before I was incarcerated, I used to go for regular treatments. The first time I went, my foot was so sensitive to the touch, I could hardly bear the gentle hands diligently working at my sore spots. Areas that were particularly tender, to my amazement, coexisted with organs in my body where there were specific problems. I went after I had recovered from a bout of food poisoning, and sure enough, the tender spots on my feet were the stomach, bowels, and intestines. After months of regular maintenance, the treatments hurt less and my symptoms were better. I thought this natural medicine outstanding as a recipient. Initially, the thought of touching someone's feet revolted me, and I thought it beneath me. I was, after all, an educated businesswoman. But I became a businesswoman in prison, and any rational human being could see the benefit of being enrolled in a program that got her out of a 10 by 8 foot cell during the day. I learned to touch other people's feet and be happy about it. My days were filled with learning, and although I was massaging people's feet, I was happy to be working again. Working in the prison spa allowed me to earn a little extra through tips and to socialize with clients as well as the other inmates who worked there. The days passed more quickly, and even though we ended up in the same cell each night for a while, if only momentarily, I was permitted to feel somewhat normal. The salon was small, separate from the prison. The girls working in there did hairstyling and coloring. I worked in the larger section of the prison that was accessible to the clients from the street. Upon entry, to the immediate left, was the small room where I worked. It was air conditioned, so the temperature was always pleasant, and it was filled with comfortable chairs that reclined so clients could relax as we worked. While I worked, I no longer noticed the guards who supervised us during the day. All of the programs were supervised. Their presence was a constant factor in our life. Despite there being so few of them in the facility, there are some 70 officers and over 2,000 prisoners. I wasn't tempted to run, not even with those odds. I was not stupid enough to jeopardize what I had. None of the women were. Isra, her kind of dipping into reflexology is based on my interest in reflexology. When I traveled through Southeast Asia and also when I lived in Indonesia, it was kind of where reflexology came into my life. Really incredible natural therapeutic treatment. And when Isra talks about the first time that she had her feet touched in the appointment, that's exactly what it was like for me. That kind of the sensitive areas were tender, and that got in the novel. So thank you very much for listening. Tomorrow we will go back to Cambodia.